I am back from my time on the governor's campaign and very happy to be working on policy and focused on all of the work that you all are doing and making real progress in the workforce area. So back as being executive director of the state workforce board, but with more policy input in the governor's office and joining a senior policy team. So it does add, I think, it's a nice complement to the work that we do on the board because of all the expertise we have on the board and bringing that into the policy making process. So I know over the past 6 months or so, Abby has worked really hard to get feedback from everyone and put together the bare bones of what we believe the strategic plan should look like. And I know everyone, just to level set folks, this is not a strategic plan for the workforce system. This is a strategic plan for the workforce board and its role in the system. So, you know, if you think there's something missing there, like we should be focused on housing, that's not necessarily in our purview, but we can, you know, the board can have a role within the system as it relates to supporting the folks who support our housing needs. So just to level set that with everyone from the get-go. I know Abby has circulated some documents, so just to touch briefly on those. Our plan for today is essentially to go through what the framework of the strategic plan is going to look like when it's in its totality, and then go through our overarching goals and strategies. We are hoping today we can vote to approve goals and strategies, but that is with your input and make changes in real time so that we can then use these to build out the entire strategic plan. So in the email Abby sent you, just so everyone's clear on what we have. So the strategic plan framework is just what the whole plan is going to actually be looking like. So that's just going through, you know, we'll start it with a letter from the governor. We'll have an executive summary from Adam and myself about what's in the plan, table of contents. We'll have the folks at VDOL provide just the current kind of workforce landscape and data, the actual meat of the plan with the vision, missions, and goals. And then we'll have subsections for each of these strategies with the one pagers, which Abby just provided 2 examples of. They're not finalized, but just to show you the level of granularity that we would go into in breaking out each of the approved strategic plan areas so that you understand it's not just going to be like, here's the headline. We'll actually have folks ultimately approve all of the one pagers, but our focus today is just on those kind of top line vision, mission, and goals. And then obviously at the end we'll have an appendix. So that's just kind of the whole of the plan. But for our focus today, what we've done is taken feedback from meetings with businesses, meetings with individual board members, meetings with state agencies, the governor's priority areas, feedback we've received from you all, and turned it into our best, you know, option for a strategic plan. We've worked very hard on this. And one of the feedback from the first iteration was that it was probably not feasible to get all of the things done that we wanted to do with the first iteration that Abby went through with you all. And so we took that and pared that list down to kind of our absolute top priorities. But we are committed to, in our one pagers, making sure we outline what possible next steps could look like so that this process can continue, obviously afterwards. I'm going to pause there for any questions, and then we can move into the actual subject matter. Or Abby, if you want to add anything. Anyone? Okay.
Just one quick question. Is there a separate document that has the vision and the goals that I should be looking at, or is that you're going to walk us?
So okay. Abby will share her screen, but I believe she sent that around to everyone.
Not sure I got that, but okay, great. I look forward to seeing it.
Okay. I think so. You have the benchmarks and strategies, which I sent Ellen, and then the vision and the goals. That is not something that we've sent around and fully developed yet, if that's the distinction that you're making there. So, but I can go ahead and share my screen now, and so everyone can be looking at the same thing.
So at a high level, based on our meetings, we've narrowed our focus to kind of 4 big areas. So we've got our WIOA focus, we've got system alignment, the increase and enhanced workforce supports, and then the 5, coordination of education and training, and then the facilitating of relocation, recruitment, and retention. So we're going to go through these one by one, but I guess ultimately what we're looking for in this first piece is anything that you feel like we're missing that needs to be added, or things that you don't like and want to be taken away. For specific wordsmithing, that stuff we can follow up with offline. The ultimate goal is by 1:30 today, if possible, that we're able to approve these strategies and benchmark. We can come to an agreement on strategies and benchmarks to bring to the full board meeting. If we don't, and we have more feedback and more work to do, we'll schedule another 15 or 20-minute meeting after we get the feedback. So don't feel the pressure to get it done today, but that's our ultimate goal. So we'll start with WIOA.
Tori,
go ahead, Adam.
hey, just the question about sort of vision and mission here, relative to the strategies and benchmarks. Can you read what we have to date that we're working from? Just, I think it'd be helpful to view these through that lens.
Yes. Abby, would you be able to pull that up and we can, or do you not have that in front of you? BNR.
I don't think I have that document in front of me. Let me see.
All right, if not,
It's,
I don't know, curveball not intended.
no, that's okay. I didn't have it up on my screen for now. But Abby can work on grabbing that and we can start going through the sections. But again, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward in that our charge is essentially the coordination of the workforce system, right? It's oversight, coordination, and I'll go ahead, Commissioner.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just putting my hand up to get in line.
Oh, okay. So, our job is to affect essentially the statewide workforce system, workforce policies. In the past, our focus again has just been on WIOA, but in the nature of the statute, it has been coordination of the system as a whole, and not just focused on WIOA, but making sure there's a seamless work going on between all state agencies. But focusing first on WIOA, as that is our charge, I think these are pretty straightforward and they're things that we're already doing. However, we're formalizing them into the plan. So the develop, implement, and modify the WIOA state plan. We all went through this process prior. The next one I believe is due in March 15th of 2024. So we would restart this process in the summer. The procurement of the one-stop operator system, which we have made great progress on, and the applications for that close in the next week or so. Which would be overseeing obviously all of our one-stop partners. And then finally, number 3, which I think is the piece that everyone has been asking for, which is us actually reporting to you on how these systems are working so that you're able to ask questions, take testimony. I say that because you're not really testifying, but hear from agencies and departments about how this money is working, how it's being spent, how we can better leverage it. And ultimately have real performance metrics that the board can be tracking in real time to ensure that our federal dollars are being used well and that the one-stop system is functioning efficiently, which is essentially the biggest charge of the workforce board. Commissioner?
This is, and I'm kind of looking at this from the lens of like also helping to create a standardized plan that helps guide us. So I'm looking at both content, but also the way it's written as well. So just under strategies under WIOA, like number 1 has actions assigned to it, develop, implement, modify, but 2 and 3 don't. And so I think we should just when we're looking at 1, 2, and 3, I think 2 and 3, we just need to decide what are we doing with the one-stop operator system. So I think you, like you just said, Tori, in your review, procure a one-stop operator, right? So if the action there is in the end, we need to procure a one-stop operator vendor, or develop the one-stop operator system. Same thing with the state performance accountability measures. What is the strategy there? Is it to build out the accountability measures, to better track the accountability? Again, what are we doing? So I would just try to get 1, 2, and 3 to match with the way they're written.
Yes, so yes, and I agree with you there. I think, as I mentioned into the spirit of it, for 2, it really is the procurement of and management of the one-stop operator system. For the state performance accountability measures, it's step 1 would be actually deciding on what our priority accountability measures are. If you talk to agencies and departments, it would be ridiculous for us to ask them for every single thing WIOA tracks. But if we have top ones that we want them to provide us, that they're doing, that would be, we need to decide our areas of priority there. And then 2, obviously, would be assessing and evaluating effectiveness of programs. So yeah, Commissioner, that's a point well taken in terms of the wordsmithing. Chris?
I was just to add on.
Go ahead. Sorry, Commissioner.
No, just before I forget the thought. So I always think of begin with the end in mind, right? Like, what are we trying to accomplish with these? So like state performance accountability measures, it could be something like better align the system, the workforce system, using performance and accountability measures, right? So again, that way everything we're doing with accountability, with measures and performance, is all around how to make the system more efficient and more effective.
Okay. Noted.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Michael had said, I think that there should be some group that oversees not just producing a report. I don't know if it's the board or if there's a certain agency or entity that would be charged with getting all the information pulled together in a way that it reads in a systematic way. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yes, and that's something, if this is an area obviously folks agree on, that would be something that when we're fleshing out the kind of strategic one-pager, I'll just use for lack of a better word, but essentially the operational document of how that works. I think that's a really good idea, that there's, one entity focused on, within the board focused on making sure that these reports are done and it's systematic. So we'll include that for our feedback. Any other thoughts from folks?
Just
Where are
a
we?
just a minor clarify.
Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a minor thing and this is something that I think is part of the overall. Oh, actually, you know what? It's beyond WIOA, so I'll save it for the next one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sounds good.
Tori, I was just going to ask, in terms of like the last one, align the state performance accountability measures. I like what Michael's been saying, but also, is there any teeth in, more than develop and implement and modify this, and also, procure and manage this, the one-stop operating system. But where can the state workforce board make recommendations? Where's the teeth? And we're going through the actions, but can the state workforce investment board make some decisions of, this isn't going well, or where's our teeth in making sure that this stuff that we're not just monitoring, that we have some impact?
So in our draft for the one pager for this, hits on that exactly. Essentially, the workforce board would be reviewing. They would receive the information and then reviewing and providing recommendations to the governor's office for policy implementation or improvements. So the teeth would be, honestly, you're providing recommendations for the governor. Obviously, in statute, we don't have direct. We can't penalize anyone for not doing things directly. However, we can, produce memos or official reports that go to the governor's office for corrective measures. So that would be that one. On the one-stop operator, we would have the teeth to essentially end the contract. Our thought was this first one would be for just a year and we'd keep it that way. And that the board would basically decide whether or not, you know, the contractor is actually aligning the system the way that we're looking for it to. And if they're not, we can terminate the contract and look for something else. So that's really the for those two, I think, the biggest kind of teeth that we are envisioning in the whole plan.
I might put those in the work those into the benchmarks
Okay.
right up front.
Sounds good. Commissioner, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It's old. I put it down and it must have gone back up.
That's fine. Okay. Any other thoughts there before we move on? So Abby and I will make the following changes. We will update 2 and 3 to have, you know, the action-oriented words that we agreed upon or we were talking about in terms of the procurement of the one-stop operator, the development, monitoring, and, you know, review of state accountability measures. And then we will add in the, for lack of a better word, teeth to the number 3 on that one and number 2. If folks are okay with that, to move on. All right, Abby. So alignment of the workforce system, this is something almost every single one of you have talked to us about in general, about the coordination, tracking, and support services for Vermonters. So again, I think with the commissioners' feedback in mind, essentially for our strategies, it would be the development of a warm handoff system. This already exists in some way, but as each of you know, different entities that are kind of in the tentacles of each of our agencies and departments don't always do this well. And so that would be essentially utilizing something we agreed upon in our MOU with the one-stop operator to develop a way for referrals to be done seamlessly between agencies, departments, outside organizations, anyone within the workforce development system, so that, you know, we can track where someone's going, we can track, you know, what services they're accessing, and we can help make sure that each of our partners know where to send people. If someone calls SNAP, but they really need to be helped by the Department of Labor, we want to make sure that they're getting there. Or if someone is calling the Department of Labor as a business and they really need Vermont training program, that they're getting Vermont training program. So that is really, you know, kind of priority number 1 for us, because we've heard that a lot. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, on that note, you know, I think it's for this document, I think that's fine, but we should really plan to go deeper than the handoff. And I don't know if this is necessarily training, but what we've experienced through our work through the refugee program is a lot of amazing programs, a lot of great individuals that are all in place. They know about the other people out there and could do a handoff, but nobody's in charge of knowing how the whole system interacts together. And that's where we're really seeing so much of this fall apart, both for refugees and for just a standard WIOA traditional applicant. So it's beyond the handoff, and as long as we're intentional about that, and I don't know how to solve for it, definitely training and better communication, or improving communication. But I think it's bigger than just handoff.
Agreed. Yes, I agree. And I believe we will be tasked, you know, there'll be some budget requests that may task the board with some of that work. I'm not privy to, you know, put the cart before the horse there, but I do believe that there's an interest from our office and from the legislature from having us have a heavier hand in some of that coordination. Commissioner?
We've come back to this comment I'm going to make a couple different times. And maybe the best thing to do is just figure out how we articulate it in the plan. But there's always this question of, is this the plan for the state's workforce system, or is this the plan for the board and for what the board will focus on, or is it the system? And so, and maybe it's both. And so I would also think too, just in using what Adam shared as an example, is if the strategy is about developing a better system, right, then also figuring out how are we engaging with all the partners and the players to create that system, right? Because the board is only a 2 positions strong, right, in terms of bandwidth, and maybe it will grow over time. But in general, I think also trying to figure out how do we articulate whether or not, you know, the board is developing a policy or a recommendation on something versus the board is actually doing some form of work versus the board is working with workforce partners to create the desired system we want to have in place. So
Yeah.
anywhere I don't have a direct recommendation here other than we should just make sure we articulate that. So when, you know, some random person down the road is reading the plan or the strategies and the benchmarks, it's really clear who's doing the work or what role the board is playing in that effort.
Yes, agreed. So I think that that brings up a good point, because this is a good way to illustrate how the one pagers will function within the plan. So, you know, as you kind of mentioned, warm handoff system sounds great. We're talking about how is this actually going to work within the system. So for a one pager for something like this, it would be like by, you know, July of 2023, the state workforce board staff will convene, you know, with the one-stop operator, a meeting of all of the one-stop partners and relevant agency stakeholders. They will, you know, so the process of it will be honestly very operational from what our role is. And our role within all of these things is essentially to let the people who are doing the work to do the work well and just support those conversations so that they happen. We really are a convener at heart. And so I think, yes, your point is right. Abby and I will not single-handedly be developing any piece of warm handoff system. I think that would cause a mutiny within state government. So I think, you know, we'll be working with, the whole point of it is that each of these will require us to convene the relevant folks to get that job done. And as you all have mentioned, there's never one person kind of solely focused on getting these groups together to get them to solve the problems. And that's kind of the role that we'll see ourselves playing in each of those, in each of these areas. Chris?
Yeah, so maybe I'm just confused at the 11th hour, so I apologize up front if I make a stupid comment. But when we're going through this strategy, what I'm not seeing is as we go through those, those items, who actually owns each item, and then what our role is from a governance perspective. So are we offering input, or are we offering like support for what comes out of this, whether it be operational or policy oriented?
I think it would be a good chance for maybe Abby to pull up one of the one pagers to show how that works. For this document, our purpose is as high level as possible. If you were to pull up the one pager for, I don't know if we have one, for the regional business partnerships, which is our next thing, each one has the situation. So essentially, what's the current state of play as we're dealing with, you know, regional businesses in Vermont, the solution. So a broad level of like, what is actually the solution to the problem? It needs to be, we need to communicate better. We need to listen more. We need to have a coordinated whatever. And then we have the actual milestones. So that would be, well, as we mentioned, so for this one, for the regional business partnerships, it would be by February of 2023, the state workforce staff will release the county visit schedule open for board member feedback. By May 2023, the staff will establish a formal communication system with state agencies to reduce those efforts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the bottom, we have who the lead partners are, what the major milestone or measure is, and then what the board's role would be in the plan for each of those. That makes sense. So that's why, again, with a lot of this, first of all of the feedback is incredibly helpful as we're developing this, but it's really focusing on kind of like, these are the areas that we're focusing on, and each of you will have input on the how and the input for, you know, again, lack of a better word, just our operational documents, the one pagers. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so just to make sure we're really clear that, the question about, is this a board strategy or a system strategy? Makes total sense at the top for WIOA. But as soon as we get down to the next heading here, align the workforce system, I think we just need to somehow articulate that what we're speaking about in this document is only board functions, not system functions. Right?
Okay. Yeah, so one of the, I mean, I think in that case, we could change that, because I think that would be, that title sounds like we're solely aligning the workforce system. But one of the goals and objectives of the board is to be involved in, one of our charges federally is workforce system alignment. And this is the role that we play in the workforce system alignment. So yes, we can rephrase that so that it does not sound like the board will single-handedly align the entire workforce system, although we will play a large part in that, given that many members on the board are the people who are in the workforce system. So moving to number 2, unless there's any more thoughts on number 1 there. Regional business partnerships. So again, understanding with Commissioner Harrington's feedback to have action words there, we can change that around. But essentially, one of the things we have done in the past has been engaging with business owners and different organizations across the state. We've done county tours in every single county. We've met with countless business owners. And so, this is formalizing that into the plan. But what we wanted to do is essentially take that work that we've been doing and make it a part of the board work, so that board members have access to this information in real time. We're coordinating with workforce agencies and departments, and we're able to incorporate this into committee work and into the board work as a whole. So, meeting with business owners monthly, meeting with different counties across the state on almost a monthly basis, as well as meeting with and listening to our regional development corporation partners, local chambers, and other community partners and organizations, and getting their feedback and formally submitting that on either a monthly or quarterly basis to the board about what we're hearing on the ground from businesses and their workforce needs. And this way it can spur some discussion. Obviously, a lot of this is anecdotal. It's not, system-wide data, but using this to spur some discussion on any feedback we need to be giving to, the folks that are actually programmatic services and actually providing services, to make sure that if they need to tailor things or we need to be nimble in real time, that we're able to make those changes. And one of the things there is that we recognize that lots of different agencies and departments do this work already. So VDOL does a lot of labor on location. ACCD meets with businesses all the time. They're in the business of business. And so one of the areas as well is the board will develop, and this is one of the one pagers, develop a way so that we're not duplicating efforts and we're actually coordinating these visits with the other agencies and departments to make it a richer experience for the board. Any other thoughts there?
I have a lot, but I don't know if it's helpful for today. This is just one of those really challenging things that we've talked a lot about in the past. It's easy to quickly develop fatigue amongst the employers from the visits. Already, we have every entity trying to get the employers an opportunity. So I think we're just going to have to be really mindful of that and engage employers in the right way, getting them the right information, requesting the right information. A business retention expansion strategy is a complex thing. And if that's sort of what we're talking about here, because it seems a little more than just workforce board work, especially when you look further down on the next item. I think it's going to be very tricky to implement this in a way that crosses everybody's desk in the right way.
Yes, I mean, I think from the highest level, we want to make sure the board has information from obviously businesses on kind of a county by county basis. From an operational level, like you said, there's a lot of fatigue. And so a lot of our work, Abby and I, will be making sure that we're not duplicating efforts. We're not asking the same 5 people to give us information. We're not tiring them out, but that we're operationalizing the information that they give us and making changes in real time. Or being honest about, if something's a federal requirement, like we talked to an employer the other day who was like, I really want to change this rule because I can't hire someone of this age. And I was like, that's an OSHA requirement nationally. There's nothing we can do there, but we can help you with X, Y, and Z. And so I think the important piece of this will be just the real-time communication, both to the board, to the state agency partners, and then also to the business owners themselves, and also keeping them in the loop of what we're doing, so that they can we can expand our network and get more feedback as the board does more work. And then for 3, the board staff will leverage community partnerships and host events directly offer workforce services, information, resources to marginalized communities no less than 4 times per year. This is something that we're already working on with Susanna Davis's office. She is working on radar meetings, which essentially utilizes their information networks and their partners to get more people of color to meet with folks in state agencies, with different boards and commissions, with different employers, so that we are able to assist them directly and in a relatively informal way. And so the board staff will essentially be working directly with Susanna Davis's office on having these meetings, inviting board members, getting these folks onto JobLink, getting them involved if they need support services, to get kind of our foot in the door there, to increase diversity at more organizations that are looking for people of color. Thoughts or feedback there? And I will note again, as I said, there is likely going to be some requests of us to be doing more of this type of work in facilitating some system alignment as it pertains to new Americans and immigrants. And so I just want to be mindful of that, likely to be involved in our system alignment. But for now, we're focused on our radar meetings.
Tori, I don't have something to add necessarily for this one, but just backing up to what Adam was saying on the previous one about engaging and aligning our work with employers. I think the only thing I would add there is, and maybe this is kind of like what we're insinuating anyways, but figuring out why are we meeting with employers, right? Are we meeting with employers so that they can help us better understand the system, or are we meeting with employers to help them solve their business problems? Because having been in a similar role to Adam in the past, it really depends on why we're going to them, and whether they feel like we're just going to them to constantly be asking them for more information to help us sell our own message, versus are we bringing resources to them? Are we identifying what their challenges are to growth and prosperity, and trying to help them with answers? So I do think part of that alignment is figuring out, we don't want to step on toes, but we don't want to, the fatigue piece is really real. So figuring out like, what is the purpose of going to them? If it's to help them, find money and solve problems so that they can grow their business, they're probably more inclined.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I think it's, getting feedback from them, but I also think it's connecting them with folks. I think, as we have the sector-based committees. They are they've been exceptional. We've really enjoyed the folks that are on those. We've expanded our our tentacles that way. But as you know, a committee is only 5 to 10 people. And so again, expanding, if a committee is working on things specifically, we want to make sure that, again, we're socializing it with folks that are in the industry. But you're right, we can't just keep asking business owners, because everyone does for their feedback, and they all have the same feedback, which is they can't find anyone to work for them. But I think learning some of the specifics that are issues, for example, in the ski industry, that they, want to work with the folks at FPR so that they can provide health insurance year round to their folks that maybe work in skiing or working in the, outdoor rec in the summer. So I think the goal is ultimately to be helpful for them in a policy perspective, but also to provide them the resources that they need to connect with people. Righty. Moving on to the coordination of the education and training. So again, just as a high level, we want to identify Vermont's high demand careers and develop some career pathways to be seamlessly executed by training and education providers while engaging Vermonters at any stage in their career path. To leading to greater financial independence and personal fulfillment. So a very easy, low-balling goal there. The first kind of step there is, obviously, we have our Career Pathways Committee that I believe is a statutory requirement. And one of the things I think that, we can do as a board is to facilitate the effectiveness of that committee. So for benchmarks there, it's, as simple as one, just actually having those career pathway meetings. Those have not happened. I know we've had one in the past year, but they have not been happening previously. So establishing those to happen quarterly, and working as a committee to establish an approval process for reviewing and approving career pathways. I think that July of 2023 will probably be too ambitious of a goal there, but I think in general, the sentiment would be is that the Career Pathway Committee would actually have a formal process for reviewing, approving career pathways. And a lot of this is informed by the feedback we've gotten from Jessica Careless at AOE, and how can we make those better? And then every year after, the Career Pathways Committee can agree upon priority career pathways that we want to promote or work with others to essentially create pipelines for. Ellen?
Yeah.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Oops, sorry about that. Sorry. I think this is going to be one of those ones where how we define high demand careers is going to be key. I know that the department has one with the McClure Foundation, for instance. But I also think we need to not take our eye off the ball around certain types of, this might not be the right way, but sort of like highly, like critically important careers, meaning like more plumbers and carpenters and electricians and HVAC. Like they may not be a large number of positions relative to,
But we
say,
feel the shortage.
program, like, like computer program staff or nurses, but they're so critical to the physical running of our homes and communities. So I just want to flag that we should be sure not to, to take a holistic view about what we mean by high demand or essential workers or some other way to flag that need.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ellen, because I agree with you. We might see year to year, maybe there's like maybe the Flynn's doing something crazy and there's 5,000 theater performers that they need for 1 year, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that a critical occupation for our priorities. But agreed on especially on the technical side. So yes, you're right. I think in developing what we define as high value or high demand careers should not just be by the numbers, but based on, where's the need. So healthcare obviously comes to mind, childcare comes to mind, et cetera. Adam?
Yeah, this brings up the future demand need. that's not driven by current employment numbers. So it's abandoning the age-old tools that we have, which is if we have X number of people in this career today, we know we're going to need this much in the future. Whereas with the technological changes and automation and everything and AI that's occurring, somebody's got to be trying to look over the horizon on that. I don't know whose job it is, but it probably falls to us. And just having some intentionality about that, it would be easy
Yeah.
to train a whole bunch of people in careers that AI makes obsolete in 15 years.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we need to be careful about, I think you're right. We can't just be focusing on what's needed today. So yes, yes to both of you in that, I do not intend, I think when we're whittling this down, we should not just make it based on, we have 10,000 jobs open in one sector. We should be focused on what the immediate and long-term needs are for the state of Vermont. So yeah, that's good feedback. So just see. So then, in addition to that, for our second one would be, will be more us, the board working directly with AOE, and working with them and their relevant stakeholders to just get an understanding and report to the board on needs within the education system as it relates to technical education, primary, secondary, and post-secondary education, and how we can assist in that coordination as well. I know lots of things are going on at AOE, so we've kept this pretty vague, other than the fact that we want to make sure that we have a touch point with them twice a year so that we can make sure the board is understanding of the changes that are happening kind of within the cradle to career system. And, as projects or relevant issues arise, that we're able to kind of have a formal way of getting involved. Go ahead, Heather.
Hi. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tori. And I'm
No,
sorry
that's
that I'm
okay.
late. I'm sorry that I'm so late to this meeting. I think that sounds great. I just wanted to clarify, is this summary that you have coming from the current career pathway committee? Or is this something that's coming from the operating committee? Because we currently have a subcommittee that's on career pathways, I believe.
Yes, we do. And so the Career Pathways Committee ultimately, it has been more active since Abby and I have taken over, but it has kind of fallen out of the formal processes that it had before prior. And so this would be within the work of the Career Pathways Committee, but this document obviously is right now being approved by the operating committee, if I'm answering your question.
No, I'm very excited to see this because I think this had been my hope all along for our career pathways work with the SWIB. So very excited. Thanks.
Okay, great. Happy to hear that. And then the third piece of that is, again, it's a board compliance issue, but also I think will be helpful to some of the folks at Department of Labor, is that we will bring back the training credentialing committee that will meet at least twice per year to approve state endorsed and industry recognized credentials. Right now, we'll obviously do it in coordination with VDOL, but right now I believe VDOL doesn't have to be doing that work and they're doing all of that work. So we would be assisting them in doing that, because they've basically taken it on as the committee has been relatively inactive. Go ahead, Adam.
I thought there was some federal rule change that made us no longer compliant in having an inability to perform this. So we are no longer doing it. Do I have a misunderstanding on the circumstance there?
I don't know.
So didn't we send out a notice to everybody that says, hey, for the time being, because we can't track this longitudinally, because under federal WIOA requirements, you have to meet like 6 or 7 reporting requirements for this credentialing to be able to endorse that that entity is in fact an approved vendor. And that we can
Oh,
no longer
yes,
do that. Isn't there something there?
I don't know if it's that we can no longer do that. I do not remember the specifics as this was a while ago, but I can look back and get that information for you, Adam. But I don't believe it was that we can't do it in totality. I think that it was going to cause, I think it was harder for, I mean, to be honest, I think the problem with this training and credentialing system is I believe it ultimately makes it harder for some of the folks that are involved just because they have to jump through so many different hoops to get this certified training and credentialing like banned on them, but I don't remember what that was. But it's still within the WIOA statute that we have to be involved in this process. I just don't know. I need to look back and
We can do
double
it
check on
offline.
that.
It's fine, yeah.
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 All right. Any other thoughts there?
I'm gonna go off,
then
I'm gonna go off video, but stay with you. I understand there's might be a fire alarm happening soon, so I'm
Oh,
gonna go get
yes.
my coat, so I will, but I'm staying with you.
Okay. Yes, there
And
is supposed to be a
Tori-
fire drill at State House today.
Tori, just a
Um,
flag, I think we skipped over one, so I'm gonna go back
Oh,
up. I think we skipped this one.
yes, I did. Sorry, everyone. I got excited
No,
about
that's
education.
That's okay.
So increase and enhance workforce supports. So I think this is based off, I mean, the first bullet point here is based off feedback that we have received from all of you is that, being a part, and from many board members, is that being a part of the board in the past has not necessarily felt like there's a purpose. And that's not to say that the conversations aren't helpful, but just that I think the board has wanted, to be a part of the actual policy development process. And so what we've done is we're essentially creating a phased approach. And I believe this is the other one pager we sent around. But the top headline is essentially by, fiscal year 2025, the State Workforce Board could vote on recommendations to present to the governor's office for his budget. That is obviously many years in the future. We know folks want to have input right now. And so, for this year, our goals are very simple. This year, what we would do is provide legislative updates bi-weekly to you based on, just here's what's going on. So here's the governor's budget. Here's what was happening in House Commerce today. Here's what was happening in labor today, essentially, so that you all have an understanding of what's going on in the State House. And then we are holding bi-weekly office hours on Friday mornings, which we'll send out to everyone so that people on the board can have real-time input and feedback on what's going on in the legislative session. So that's phase one. And then phase two would essentially have our sector-based committees research some suggestions regarding workforce-related solutions. So in that case, they would be meeting throughout the summer with the agencies and departments and hearing what their policy priorities are, helping talk to them about, in the policy development phases about their priorities and needs, and working with us to provide input in the front end of the policy and budget development process. And so essentially this, there becomes more and more of a formal process, but that's kind of the start of it, is that the board would ultimately be able to provide recommendations to the governor. I think the thing here that folks, just to be clear on, is that, while it is a very big board with lots of federal money and lots of different partners, we ultimately are the governor's workforce development board. And so it is not included in my plan that we submit a recommendation to the legislature as our policy priorities. It would be to the governor's office for budget development processes, if that makes sense for everyone. All right. And then the other piece is a long-term strategy. So by December 2023 is not not going to happen. But it is essentially that we will develop, and we have developed one piece of this as an employer and employee toolkit that has all of the resources relevant to workforce development for employers and for potential prospective workers. That is reasonable for us to do by the end of the year. However, as a part of the larger communications work that we have with our state of Vermont communicators, is a move towards translation services for each of our workforce related documents. I believe there's going to be, this is going to happen and our whole entire state of Vermont is going to be doing this for lots of documents, but we wanted to put that in here that phase one of this would be developing those toolkits essentially that have all the relevant information based on agencies and departments. And then phase two would be working with folks to translate these services so that they're more accessible to other folks. Adam, is that a new hand or an old hand?
Old.
Okay. So then, yes, finally, last but not least, relocation, recruitment, and retention. So essentially our two focuses are workforce diversity and then collaboration and efficiency of strategies. We are working very closely with tourism and marketing, but I think the biggest feedback we've heard from them is that, and from other folks, is that, a lot of our relocation efforts are regionally focused. And so some regions are very high performing. I'll shout out to BDCC, and other regions have either capacity issues or are struggling to meet the needs when we're trying to relocate folks there. And so the board's role would essentially be kind of another more convening work, is working with ACCD, labor, other, relevant agencies, as well as their regional partners to help strengthen that system and, provide recommendations on continuous improvement so that it becomes even more efficient. And then again, last but not least, working with the Office of Racial Equity and other interested community partners to increase and retain equitable representation of marginalized groups in the workforce. So we will be hosting quarterly meetings with them, but also assist using the racial equity tool that all of state government uses for their policy development to evaluate any new policies that come out of the workforce board as it relates to workforce equity and diversity. Adam?
So near and dear to my heart is the relocation, recruitment, retention. It feels a little distant from the workforce board. If we had that vision and mission, I think I would struggle with how this necessarily fits in the direct operation of the board for this document. But then also in 1B, the board will utilize existing board funds to promote work of the board, Vermont communities, businesses. So that statement is unique to this benchmark in regards to the other benchmarks above, especially in reference to use of funds. Is that intentional? Is that just have that land there but not elsewhere?
So I think I see your point about how it feels distant. I think that's why we're not going deep into this section. I think obviously, as you have mentioned many times in the past and others, is that part of the workforce system is we need more people here. And so I think if we didn't have any section on relocation, it would probably be missing the mark here in terms of especially the system coordination. I think we are not in the business of actually relocating anyone here. I mean, you obviously are, but that's ACCD's stuff. Our focus is more on the system of the relocation of people here and system improvement. So that's what our focus is. I think that piece of it is Abby has been incredibly successful in our marketing efforts with little to no money and reaching quite literally hundreds of thousands of people. And so we would like to continue to supplement that work using existing, not a lot, not millions of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars, but money to boost and promote labor or tourism and marketing's efforts, our own efforts, and as well as any resources that we have. So that's where the kind of state funds comes in.
Okay, but we're gonna also be needing state funds in other areas too, right? Is it?
So the thing is that the board funds, like that's board operational funding. So we can use that for board operations like our social media, advertising, etc. We do not have, we have the purview as, you know, with Department of Labor to approve that, like that's within our purview. It's not within our purview to use board funds to do policy necessarily. So it's the operating budget that could be used for advertising.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead.
So- I don't want to go too deep in this, but I think I'm struggling a little bit too. And I just want to make sure I understand this as well. Like when I think about these efforts, you know, I think ACCD does a lot of the promotional aspect of the recruitment.
I gotta go. Bye, guys.
Oh, bye. Labor does a lot of the hands-on trying to help people with the job connectivity. And I think in the back of my mind, this group could serve as a convener or a place where we understand maybe broadly what businesses are struggling with and trying to make sure that ACCD's recruitment marketing is aligned and the work that Labor's doing with the actual job engagement, that those are aligned. That's kind of where I imagined we fit in, but maybe I'm wrong there too.
No, I think you're right on, Lindsay. I think that's why we kept it pretty vague, as in we are not in the service delivery business and we are definitely not doing the recruitment directly. So I think for kind of bullet point 1, that's really is we're serving as kind of the nexus between the actual service delivery that's happening, the infrastructure once we actually say, oh, someone's moving here, and you know, the folks at VDTM who are actively recruiting Vermonters to come here.
Okay.
Other thoughts from folks? Commissioner?
I think one of the things too, where there's a role to be played is that because we're all independent agencies, departments, and partner organizations, there's a gap in terms of when we say like an in-demand occupation or an in-demand sector, right? The question always comes back to, well, who decides that, right? So who decides which sectors are going to be the ones we focus on? And part of that, I think, could rest with the board here as a collective, right? Not as an edict, but essentially saying if part of the role of the board every year, every 2 years is to identify in-demand sectors, that would just help guide, at least from the department's perspective, help guide our strategic work so that it doesn't seem like we're picking, you know, up occupations or industries just out of thin air. They actually align. So I think also from that perspective of not just being a convener, but also identifying some of these decisions that need to be made that don't belong to any one agency or any one organization, but every organization or agency needs to rely on that decision to set their future plan. And so I think that may be a role, you know, we could, as a board, kind of claim in terms of helping to guide the decision-making processes for agencies and organizations going forward by helping to set kind of those standards that we align our strategies with.
Yeah, definitely. Chris?
Yeah, this is a question for Michael. Are you talking about maybe establishing a set of criteria in terms of making, you know, good decisions in terms of what would be the most critical needs?
It could be, you know, sometimes we look at it as like, again, the industry one seems to be very interesting because we need to align essentially our talent pipelines to that, right? So we have
Right.
to align our educational strategies for training and education to those. And we tend to use a variety of different methods to identify what those are, right? So it's either coming out of Matt's shop in LMI, it's coming from the McClure Foundation, it's coming from just companies that we see moving here, or which ones are utilizing or have the potential for growth. But again, to your point, Chris, maybe there's a metric or a system, but I think at the end of the day, I can't just declare that these are our in-demand sectors, right? Where I think if we said, hey, we're all coming together as a board, we use maybe these 5 different measures or areas that we look at, and every 2 years or every 3 years we realign our in-demand industries or sectors so that we can then, as a collective, realign our strategies, our training programs, our feeder industries, our recruitment efforts, right? Like I don't, otherwise it just kind of seems like the buckshot method, where you just kind of like try to just shoot out and see what you can find. Like we know tech is an in-demand sector, but really identifying and having a decision so that all agencies and organizations are working towards a strategic sector. So again, not very well thought out or spoken, but I think that could be a role we play.
Yeah, I honestly think that's a really good idea, Commissioner. So being mindful of time and the fact that we no longer have a quorum, we cannot vote on anything today. But I think you all have given really good feedback. And so what Abby and I can do is take this feedback, rework this document a little bit and send to folks and get something on the books that, we can get more feedback by email if you guys come up with things, but try to get a more finalized document and get something on the books for us that should be a relatively quick meeting to officially approve these plans based on feedback. How does that sound to everyone? Good. All right, well, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate this. Your feedback is incredibly helpful for us, so we really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.
Bye.